So there I was, standing next to Commander Tom Malley on the observation deck of the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy, watching what could only be described as the universe's most expensive joke unfold before our eyes. The Galactic Defense Academy, they called it, the elite training facility for the best and brightest warriors from across 17 different star systems. And somehow, they had decided to let humans in. Commander Malley adjusted his bioscanner with one of his 4 arms, his compound eyes reflecting the morning light streaming through the Academy's atmospheric dome. Another exceptional class this year, he clicked in that optimistic way of his species. The Zentari were always optimistic. They had to be, when you lived on a planet where everything tried to eat you twice before breakfast. I watched the cadets moving through their morning drills below us, and honestly, it was like watching a nature documentary about apex predators. There was Korvek, the Manthari cadet, whose species evolved from the most successful pack hunters in the Andromeda Spiral. His natural camouflage shifted colors as he moved, and those retractable claws could slice through battle armor like it was tissue paper. Beautiful, really. Terrifying, but beautiful. Then there was Thesara, representing the aquatic hydrozoan empire. Her gills filtered combat stimulants directly from the air, while her pressure-resistant hide could deflect plasma bolts that would vaporize most beings. She moved through the training course like liquid death, which, considering her species literally secreted neurotoxins when threatened, was not exactly a metaphor. The Korvaxi twins, Zell and Zara, bounded across obstacle courses on legs that could launch them 3 stories high. Their homeworld's gravity was 4 times galactic standard, so watching them here was like watching someone play a video game on easy mode. They could probably bench press a shuttle and still have energy left for a marathon. And then, oh then, there were the humans. Commander Malley's antennae twitched as we watched Amy Kowalski attempt to keep up with her squad. She was red-faced, sweating through her regulation uniform, and breathing like she had just run up a mountain. Which, to be fair, she basically had, since the morning obstacle course was designed to challenge beings with natural advantages she simply did not possess. "Tell me again why we admitted them?" I asked Malley, genuinely curious. The human admission had been the talk of every military academy in the sector for months. Malley's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The Council's decision. Something about diversity of tactical thinking and adaptive problem-solving under pressure. Right. Because what you really want in a life-or-death situation is creative thinking from the species that once thought leeches were medical treatment. Amy stumbled, caught herself, and kept running. Her squadmates, showing the casual cruelty of youth across all species, barely slowed down. The Manthari cadet looked back with what might have been pity, if his species was capable of such emotions. The hydrozoan made a sound that definitely translated to laughter. Speaking of pressure, Malley continued, his tone shifting to something more serious. Today's the Fear Protocol examination. Ah, yes, the Academy's crowning achievement in psychological warfare training. Every cadet had to face it eventually, usually in their final year. It was designed to test not just combat readiness, but the deeper question of whether a being could maintain tactical thinking when confronted with their species' most primal terrors. Most alien species had evolved natural defenses against their homeworld's apex predators. Thick hides, venom production, enhanced speed, camouflage, pack coordination, bioelectric discharge. Something to give them a fighting chance when the thing that ate their ancestors came calling. Humans had apparently evolved anxiety and the ability to make tools. "Should be interesting," I muttered, watching Amy finally complete the obstacle course, dead last but still standing. Malley's compound eyes glittered with what his species considered humor. That's certainly one word for it. Below us, the morning training session ended, and cadets began filing toward the Academy's central complex. Soon, they would learn which one of them had been selected for today's Fear Protocol trial. I had a feeling I knew exactly who it would be. Amy Kowalski was, without question, the most perplexing admission in the Academy's 300-year history. Standing barely 5.5 feet tall, with soft pink skin that bruised if you looked at it wrong, she represented everything evolution had apparently decided was a bad idea. No natural armor, no enhanced reflexes, no ability to secrete defensive compounds. She couldn't even see properly in low-light conditions without artificial assistance. And yet, here she was, somehow having passed the entrance examinations that eliminated 97% of applicants galaxy-wide. "Look at her," chittered Korvek during the afternoon break, his Manthari vocal cords producing that distinctive insectoid laugh. "She needs external hydration every few hours, or she stops functioning. What kind of species designs itself with a built-in shutdown timer?" The other cadets gathered around, enjoying what had become their favorite pastime, human observation. It was like watching a nature documentary about the galaxy's most improbable survival story. The Sara rippled her gills dismissively. "My cousin serves on a joint task force with humans. Says they require 8 hours of unconsciousness daily just to maintain basic cognitive function. 8 hours. Every single day they voluntarily enter a coma-like state. It's like they're trying to get eaten." "Don't forget the feeding requirements," added Zell, bouncing slightly on his powerful legs. "Multiple small meals throughout the day, or they get hangry. Apparently, low energy reserves make them emotionally unstable and tactically compromised. What military commander wants soldiers who need snack breaks?" Amy, sitting alone at a corner table with her human standard nutrition pack, pretended not to hear them. But I could see her shoulders tense slightly. Humans might not have enhanced hearing, but they weren't deaf. The speculation about human inclusion had reached legendary status among Academy staff. Even Judge Quintara, the Academy's chief evaluator and a being whose species had literally evolved beyond the need for physical bodies, found the human admission puzzling. Her energy form flickered with what translated to confusion whenever she observed Amy's performance metrics. "Commander Mali," she had asked during last week's evaluation meeting, "the human scores are adequate." Not exceptional, not failing, just adequate, in every category. Physical fitness, tactical reasoning, weapons proficiency, survival skills. She performs exactly at the minimum acceptable standard across the board. It's almost statistically impossible. Mali had just clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Perhaps that's exactly the point. But even Brandon Torres, the human instructor brought in specifically to help integrate human cadets, seemed baffled by the Academy's interest in his species. Torres was built like humans apparently used to be before they discovered interstellar travel and stopped needing to chase their food across vast distances. Still, by galactic standards, he was basically made of tissue paper and hope. "I don't get it either," Torres had admitted to Mali during a private conversation I definitely wasn't supposed to overhear. "Amy's a good kid, solid performance, but she's not Special Forces material." "None of us are, really. We're endurance runners who got clever with tools. That's our whole evolutionary strategy." The mystery deepened when you looked at human military history. They had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing each other with increasingly creative methods, yet their actual physical capabilities had remained embarrassingly limited. No venom, no natural weapons, no enhanced healing. They just kept making better tools and developing increasingly complex strategies for using them. "Maybe that's it," I had suggested to Mali. "They're the ultimate tool users. When you can't evolve natural weapons, you get really good at making artificial ones." But Mali had shaken his head. "Every species makes tools, old friend. The Korvaxi make plasma weaponry that could glass a planet. The Hydrozoans engineer biomechanical symbiotes. Tool-making isn't uniquely human." So what was it? What had convinced the Galactic Defense Council that this fragile, anxious, perpetually hungry species deserved a spot alongside the galaxy's apex predators? Watching Amy struggle through afternoon combat drills, getting knocked down repeatedly by opponents who were holding back out of fear they might accidentally break her, so I had to wonder if maybe the Council had made their first major mistake in 3 centuries. Tomorrow's Fear Protocol examination would certainly provide some answers. Amy had been selected, of course. The instructors claimed it was random, but everyone knew better. The real question was whether she would survive long enough to provide those answers, or if we were about to witness the messiest demonstration of why humans shouldn't play with the big kids. The Fear Protocol was the Academy's masterstroke of psychological warfare training, and honestly, it was beautifully terrifying in its simplicity. Take one cadet, put them in a sealed chamber with a creature specifically designed to trigger every primal terror their species had evolved to fear, and see if they could still think tactically while their brain was screaming run away and never stop running. The concept had been developed by Admiral Vashi of the Korvaxi High Command, a being whose species had turned paranoia into an art form. When your homeworld featured predators that could phase through solid matter and hunt by detecting fear pheromones, you either got very good at staying calm under pressure, or you became extinct. The Korvaxi had obviously chosen option 1, the Fear Protocol. Admiral Vashi explained to the assembled cadets, her forelegs keeping her balanced while her sensor stalk swept the room. Tests your ability to maintain tactical cognition when confronted with existential dread. Combat is not merely about physical prowess. It is about keeping your mind functional when every instinct screams for self-preservation. Standing beside her, General Kraftnog nodded approvingly. The massive Zentari's bio-armor gleamed under the chamber's artificial lighting, and his compound eyes reflected the faces of nervous cadets like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Kraftnog was a legend in military circles, having survived encounters with 17 different species apex predators during his reconnaissance career. If he said something was scary, you listened. Each species faces creatures evolved to exploit their specific psychological vulnerabilities, Kraftnog continued, his mandibles clicking with authority. For Manthari, we use void stalkers, predators that hunt by mimicking their prey's pack bonding calls. Hydrozones face thermal wraiths, beings that attack through temperature manipulation. Korvaxi confront phase hunters, naturally. The assembled cadets shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew the statistics. 15% of cadets failed the Fear Protocol completely, requiring psychological rehabilitation. Another 20% passed but needed therapy afterward. The remaining 65% emerged stronger, but with a healthy respect for things that went bump in the night. "And for humans?" asked Brandon Torres, though his tone suggested he already dreaded the answer. Admiral Vashi's sensor stalks focused on him with laser precision. "Ah, yes, the humans. That presented an interesting challenge. Your species lacks specific evolutionary predators, having achieved dominance on your homeworld through tool use and pack coordination rather than natural defenses." Torres nodded slowly. "So what did you choose?" "We selected something universal," General Kraftnog replied, and I swear his compound eyes gleamed with what might have been anticipation. "Something that triggers the deep primal fear common to all sentient species, regardless of evolutionary history." They led us to the observation deck overlooking Chamber 7, the Academy's most secure Fear Protocol testing facility. The chamber itself was a 20-meter cube of reinforced transparent aluminum, equipped with emergency teleportation systems and enough firepower to level a small city if things went catastrophically wrong. And there, in the center of the chamber, was the Shadowmaw. Sweet galactic center, the Shadowmaw. Picture every nightmare you've ever had about things with too many teeth. Then multiply it by whatever your species considers the unluckiest number, then add tentacles. The creature was roughly 4 meters long, covered in what looked like living darkness that writhed and shifted constantly. Its primary mouth contained approximately 300 teeth arranged in rotating spirals, while smaller feeding appendages emerged and retracted from various points along its body. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was how it moved. The Shadowmaw didn't walk or crawl or slither. It flowed like liquid malevolence, defying several laws of physics while making a sound like whispered screaming. The Shadowmaw, Admiral Vashi announced with obvious pride, is a synthetic creation, engineered to trigger maximum fear response across all known species. It combines visual elements of pursuit predators, ambush hunters, and parasitic organisms. Additionally, it emits subsonic frequencies that directly stimulate the panic centers of most vertebrate brains. Korvex's natural camouflage flickered nervously. That thing is what humans have to face. That thing is what everyone has to face, eventually, Kraftnog corrected. Though we do adjust the intensity based on species-specific fear tolerance levels. Torres looked like he was trying very hard not to throw up. And what's the human setting? Maximum, Vashi replied cheerfully. Since we have no baseline data for human fear response, we decided to use the highest intensity level and see what happens. I watched Amy through the observation window. She stood in the preparation chamber, looking pale but determined, wearing the standard issue protective gear that would probably provide about as much protection as a paper umbrella in a meteor shower. Her hands shook slightly as she checked her equipment, and I noticed she kept taking those deep breathing exercises humans did when they were trying not to panic. This should be educational, I muttered to Commander Mali. That's one word for it, he replied, but his antennae were twitching with what I recognized as profound concern. Below us, Amy Kowalski prepared to face something designed to terrify every species in the galaxy, armed with nothing but human stubbornness and whatever mysterious quality had gotten her admitted to this academy in the first place. Before Amy's trial, we had the privilege of watching several other species demonstrate exactly how the fear protocol was supposed to work. And let me tell you, it was like watching a master class in how not to be lunch 101. First up was Moran, a third-year Korvaxi cadet built like a living tank with anger management issues. His species had evolved on a world where the landscape literally tried to eat you, so they had developed some interesting survival mechanisms. The moment he entered the chamber, his natural electromagnetic field began generating interference patterns that would confuse most predator tracking systems. The Shadowmaw, operating at Korvaxi-appropriate fear levels, emerged from its holding alcove with what I can only describe as predatory enthusiasm. It flowed across the chamber floor like spilled nightmare fuel, emitting those subsonic frequencies that made everyone in the observation deck feel vaguely nauseous. Moran's response was textbook perfect. His species' natural defense against phase-hunting predators kicked in immediately. His body began generating rapid electromagnetic pulses, essentially turning himself into a living jamming device. The Shadowmaw, confused by the interference, began circling at a cautious distance, probing for weaknesses. "Excellent spatial awareness," commented Judge Quintara, her energy form flickering with approval. Note how he maintains tactical positioning while simultaneously disrupting the creature's sensory capabilities. For 23 minutes, Moran and the Shadowmaw engaged in what could best be described as a deadly dance. The creature would attempt to close distance, Moran would pulse his electromagnetic field and reposition, the creature would probe from a different angle, and the whole cycle would repeat. It was beautiful, really. A perfect demonstration of evolved predator-prey dynamics in action. Finally, the Shadowmaw, frustrated by its inability to pin down its target, retreated to its alcove. Moran had passed with flying colors, having maintained tactical thinking throughout the entire encounter. Next came Morden, a hydrozoan cadet whose aquatic species had evolved some truly creative solutions to the things trying to eat me problem. The moment she entered the chamber, her skin began secreting a thin layer of defensive compounds that would make her extremely unpleasant to bite. The Shadowmaw, now operating at hydrozoan fear parameters, approached with a different strategy. Instead of the flowing stalking behavior it had used against Moran, it adopted a more aggressive, direct assault pattern designed to trigger aquatic prey responses. Morden's reaction was immediate and frankly impressive. Her gills flared, filtering combat stimulants directly from the air, while her body began producing bioluminescent warning patterns that strobed across her skin like a living alarm system. The message was clear: I am dangerous, well defended, and will taste terrible. Find something else to eat. The Shadowmaw, operating under its programming to simulate natural predator behavior, actually backed down. Real predators, after all, preferred easy meals to dangerous ones. Why risk injury fighting something that advertised its toxicity when there might be easier prey elsewhere? Superb threat display, Admiral Vashi observed approvingly. Classic apex prey behavior. Make yourself more trouble than you're worth. Warden completed her trial in just under 15 minutes, having successfully convinced a synthetic terror beast that she would be a poor dining choice. Then came the real show-off, Korvek the Manthari, whose species had turned camouflage into high art. The moment he stepped into the chamber, he simply vanished. Not teleportation, not cloaking technology, just natural adaptive camouflage so perfect that he became essentially invisible. The Shadowmaw entered the chamber and immediately began searching for its target. It flowed from corner to corner, extended sensory appendages, even tried echolocation-style clicking sounds. But Korvek had effectively removed himself from the equation entirely. "This is almost unfair," I commented to Commander Mali. "The Manthari evolved alongside persistence hunters," Mali replied. "Their ancestors learned that the best defense was simply not being found in the first place." For 37 minutes, the Shadowmaw searched an apparently empty chamber while Korvek remained motionless in perfect camouflage. The creature eventually gave up and retreated, having never actually located its prey. Korvek reappeared, looking smug in that particular way Manthari managed when they had successfully avoided becoming something's dinner. "Outstanding," General Kraftnog clicked approvingly. "Textbook predator evasion." The pattern was clear. Each species had evolved specific countermeasures to their homeworld's apex predators, and those same countermeasures worked beautifully against the Shadowmaw. Electromagnetic interference, chemical deterrence, perfect camouflage, threat displays, enhanced speed, natural armor. So the galaxy's successful species had developed an impressive arsenal of please, don't eat me strategies. And then there were humans. "So," I said to Brandon Torres as we prepared for Amy's trial, "what's the human anti-predator strategy exactly?" Torres looked uncomfortable. "Well, traditionally we use tools, pack coordination, and persistence hunting to exhaust larger predators." "Right," I nodded. "And in a sealed chamber with no tools, no pack, and a synthetic creature that doesn't get tired?" Torres was quiet for a long moment. "We're about to find out, I guess." The other cadets had gathered around the observation windows, and honestly, the atmosphere was less supportive classmates and more spectators at a particularly morbid sporting event. Korvek's camouflage flickered with what translated to anticipation. Norden's gills rippled with amusement. Even Moran's electromagnetic field seemed to pulse with expectation. "You think she'll last 5 minutes?" someone whispered. "I'm betting 3, came the reply. "Humans don't have any natural defenses." "What's she going to do? Think really hard at it?" The laughter that followed was not particularly kind. Below us, Amy finished her equipment check and looked up at the observation deck. For just a moment her eyes met mine through the transparent aluminum, and I saw something there that I couldn't quite identify. Then the chamber doors sealed, and Amy Kowalski stepped forward to face the Shadowmaw. Amy walked into the center of Chamber 7 with the kind of deliberate calm that usually preceded spectacular disasters. No electromagnetic pulses, no defensive toxins, no camouflage flickering across her skin. Just a small human in standard issue protective gear, standing in the middle of 20 meters of reinforced space, waiting for a synthetic nightmare to try to eat her. The Shadowmaw emerged from its alcove with the fluid menace of liquid darkness, and I have to admit, even knowing it was contained, the sight never got less disturbing. Those spiraling rows of teeth caught the chamber's lighting like some hellish smile, while the subsonic frequencies it generated made several observers step back from the viewing windows. Amy stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, breathing steadily. No panic, no defensive posturing, no attempt to find cover or concealment. She just waited. "Is she frozen?" asked the Sara, her gills fluttering with confusion. Some species have freeze responses to overwhelming fear. Humans do have that, Brandon Torres confirmed, though he sounded uncertain. But Amy's not frozen. Look at her posture. She's watching it. The Shadowmaw began its approach, flowing across the chamber floor with that nauseating liquidity that had terrorized 3 other cadets into perfect defensive responses. Its sensory appendages extended, probing the air for fear pheromones, electromagnetic signatures, chemical deterrents. All the usual prey responses it had been programmed to expect. Amy didn't provide any of them. Instead, she did something that made every observer lean forward against the viewing windows. She tilted her head slightly, like someone examining an interesting problem, and took a single step toward the creature. What is she doing? Admiral Vashi's sensor stalks focused intently on the human. That's not standard prey behavior. The Shadowmaw paused, its flowing motion stuttering slightly. The creature's programming had prepared it for flight responses, freeze responses, aggressive threat displays, camouflage attempts, and chemical defenses. It had not been programmed for curiosity. Amy took another step forward. The Shadowmaw's subsonic emissions increased in frequency, trying to trigger the panic response that should have sent any sane creature running for the nearest exit. The sound made everyone in the observation deck feel like insects were crawling under their skin. Amy ignored it completely and took a third step, now less than 10 meters from something designed to embody universal terror. "She's approaching it," General Kraftnog said, his mandibles clicking with disbelief. "She's deliberately approaching an apex predator simulation." "Maybe she doesn't understand the danger?" suggested Moran, though his electromagnetic field was pulsing rapidly with his own nervousness. Brandon Torres shook his head slowly. "No, she understands. Look at her eyes. She's not afraid. She's evaluating." And that's when things got really interesting. The Shadowmaw, confronted with prey behavior completely outside its programming parameters, began to exhibit what could only be described as confusion. Its flowing movements became more erratic, less purposeful. The creature circled Amy at a cautious distance, extending sensory appendages to probe for the fear responses that should have been flooding the chamber. Amy turned slowly, keeping the Shadowmaw in sight, but her movements were relaxed, almost casual. When the creature's appendages approached her, she didn't flinch or dodge. She simply observed them with the kind of detached interest you might show when watching an unusual insect. "This is unprecedented." Judge Quintara's energy form flickered rapidly with agitation. "The fear simulation should be at maximum intensity. She should be experiencing overwhelming terror." "Look at her biometrics," Commander Mali said quietly, checking his scanner. "Heart rate elevated but stable, stress hormones present but not spiking, brain activity shows heightened alertness but no panic response." That's when the Shadowmaw made what turned out to be a critical error. It attempted a direct intimidation display. The creature reared up to its full height, extended every sensory appendage, opened all its feeding mouths simultaneously, and emitted a subsonic roar that made the chamber's walls vibrate. Any reasonable prey species would have collapsed, fled, or at minimum produced some kind of defensive response. Amy just looked at it. Not with fear, not with defiance, not even with particular concern. She looked at the Shadowmaw with the same expression you might use when examining a slightly malfunctioning piece of equipment. Clinical. Analytical. Utterly unimpressed. And that's when everything went wrong. Or right, depending on your perspective. The Shadowmaw froze mid-display, its flowing movements stopping so abruptly that several observers gasped. For a long moment, predator and prey stared at each other across the chamber. Then, slowly, the creature began to lower itself back down. "What's happening?" whispered Korvek, his camouflage flickering nervously. "I don't know," Admiral Vashi replied, her sensor stalks tracking the Shadowmaw's movements with increasing alarm. "This isn't programmed behavior." The Shadowmaw continued lowering itself until it was pressed against the chamber floor, its sensory appendages retracting, its multiple mouths closing. The subsonic emissions stopped entirely, leaving the chamber in an almost oppressive silence. Amy took another step forward, then another. The creature didn't move. When Amy was close enough to touch the Shadowmaw, she stopped and slowly knelt down. The creature, this synthetic apex predator designed to trigger universal terror, remained motionless as the human reached out and gently placed her hand on what might have been its head. "By the galactic center," breathed General Kraftnog. "It's submitting to her." But that wasn't even the most shocking part. The most shocking part came when the Shadowmaw, this artificially engineered embodiment of primal fear, began to curl itself around Amy's feet like some oversized, nightmare fuel house pet. Its breathing slowed, its body relaxed, and within minutes the thing was making soft rumbling sounds that could only be described as contented. The Shadowmaw had fallen asleep, at a human's feet. In the observation deck, silence reigned for approximately 30 seconds before everyone started talking at once. "That's impossible," Admiral Vashi stammered. "The programming doesn't allow for that," General Kraftnog insisted. "Humans don't have apex predator characteristics," Judge Quintera flickered frantically. Brandon Torres just stared through the viewing window at Amy, who was now sitting cross-legged next to a sleeping terror beast, gently stroking what might have been its neck with the casual affection one might show a sleeping cat. "Well," I said to Commander Mali, "I think we found out what makes humans special." It was Brandon Torres who finally explained it to us, as after we had spent 20 minutes watching Amy give belly rubs to a sleeping nightmare and collectively questioning everything we thought we knew about predator-prey dynamics. "You're all thinking about this wrong," Torres said, his voice carrying that particular tone humans used when they were about to explain something obvious that everyone else had missed. "You keep calling humans prey animals because we don't have natural weapons or armor or venom. But that's not what we are." Admiral Vashi's sensor stalks focused on him with laser intensity. "Then what are you?" Torres gestured toward the chamber, where Amy was now apparently having a quiet conversation with the Shadowmaw, which had rolled over to expose what might have been its belly. "We're apex predators of apex predators." The silence that followed was the kind you usually heard right before someone's worldview collapsed entirely. "Think about it," Torres continued. "Every species here evolved defensive mechanisms against their homeworld's apex predators. You developed ways to avoid being eaten by the things at the top of your food chains. But humans? We hunted our apex predators to extinction. All of them." Commander Mali's compound eyes reflected the light as understanding dawned. "The megafauna extinction events on Earth, saber-toothed cats, cave bears, dire wolves, giant reptiles," Torres nodded. "If it was big, dangerous, and at the top of the food chain, humans killed it. Not for defense, for sport, for food. Because it was there and we were curious about what it tasted like." Judge Quintara's energy form flickered rapidly. "But your physical capabilities are irrelevant," Torres interrupted. "We didn't out-muscle them or out-armor them or out-poison them. We out-thought them. We studied them, learned their weaknesses, developed strategies to exploit those weaknesses, then implemented those strategies with relentless patience until the threat was eliminated." In the chamber, the Shadowmaw had apparently decided Amy was the perfect pillow and was now using her lap as a napping spot while she scratched behind what might have been its ears. "The Shadowmaw recognizes her," Torres explained simply. "Not as prey, not as a threat, but as something higher up the food chain than it is. She's not afraid of it because her species has faced down everything that could possibly be scary and won. The creature's responding to that confidence with the only logical response, submission." Admiral Vashi stared at the chamber in horrified fascination. "You're saying humans are so effective at killing apex predators that even synthetic ones instinctively submit?" "Pretty much, yeah. And that, my friends, is how the Galactic Defense Academy learned that when you invite humans to join your elite military institution, you're not getting clever prey animals who make good tools. You're getting the species that made Earth's apex predators extinct, then got bored and started looking for new challenges among the stars." The Academy's admission policies were quietly revised the following week. Human applications, previously considered a diversity initiative, were suddenly reclassified as priority recruitment for the Apex Threat Response Division. Amy Kowalski graduated valedictorian naturally. And the Shadowmaw? It never quite worked the same way again after meeting her. The Academy had to retire it from fear protocol duty when it started showing signs of separation anxiety whenever humans weren't around. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, usually at our expense.